What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 434 of the Established Run NBA podcast. I'm Mike Gallagher here with Drew Dinkmeyer to talk trades. We were hit with a stunner of all stunners with the Luka Doncic trade, so much so that everyone thought it was hacked. Everyone thought Shams Charania was hacked because this was such a crazy trade. We're going to talk about that, talk about the De'Aaron Fox trade that happened on Sunday. With me to do so, Drew Dinkmeyer. Dink, how's it going?
I'm still stunned. I'm still shocked. The ESPN NBA trade machine failed me. I was made to look like a fool on the valuable social media internets by posting that the trade failed because I did not believe it. It seems so unbelievable that Luka Doncic could be traded, let alone could be traded for that package. So shocking and unbelievable that it brought Zach Lowe out of hiatus to record a mini podcast last night. And so we had to get an emergency podcast in talking about this trade. Recording this on Monday, February 3rd at 10 a.m. Eastern time allows us to also get the De'Aaron Fox trade in. So a lot of the emergency podcasts that you may have listened to on the Luka trade may not have gotten the De'Aaron Fox trade in as well. We'll get to that one. But yeah, Mike, the most shocking NBA trade acquisition of my lifetime. I can't think of one that comes even close in comparison. Just completely out of the blue. Doesn't seem to really make very much sense from Dallas's perspective. We'll get into giving Nico Harrison maybe the benefit of the doubt in some cases, and then also likely just roasting because man, I don't understand how you trade Luka Doncic in the prime of his career. It is so hard to get a player of that caliber for your fan base on your roster. To willingly let them go is shocking.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. I mean, just the fact that we could start with the package that they got. I guess, why would you do that? I mean, if you take Nico Harrison at his word, they're trading for Anthony Davis, great defensive player. He's 6 years older. I just don't get it. And as you noted, if you before this, no one really thought Nico Harrison was a bad GM. The PJ Washington trade worked out. Everyone ripped the Kyrie trade. That worked out great. The Gafford trade, that it's been working well for the trades, but I mean, just to say that, we're going to trade for Anthony Davis. That's the and it's important to note they didn't talk. They wanted Anthony Davis. They didn't put him on the block.
Yes,
that's the whole why would you trade Luka? I mean, like you said, 5 first-time All NBAs. He's 25. Why would you ever do that? I don't know. I just can't give him benefit of doubt. It's just so crazy to me.
I think if you want to take the most optimistic viewpoint of Nico Harrison in the Mavs franchise, the most optimistic viewpoint, the rose-colored glasses, I'm a Mavs fan through and through, no matter what they do, I've got my laundry on and I'm rooting for the Mavs. I think you would say that Nico Harrison's moves so far have been questioned and they've largely worked out really, really well. This was a team that going into the last 2 years was short assets. And you were looking at a situation where it's like, how are you going to potentially, have enough around Luka to salvage his prime because they had lost so much on the asset front. Then they go in, they get Kyrie Irving. They go in, they draft Eric Lively with the one draft pick that they have to make up during this situation. Then they also trade for Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, 2 players that didn't look like they'd be kind of ideal fits, and they end up being ideal fits. They end up getting to the NBA Finals. I think if you had rewound, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when Nico Harrison kind of took the role, saying that they would get to the finals in a couple of years would have been a huge win, Mm-hmm. So that's the maximum amount of credit you can give Nico Harrison. Now, what I'll say is you could also point to, hey, the reason they got to the finals is this guy, Luka Doncic, that they just have moved on from. And Luka Doncic deserves more of that credit than Nico Harrison. And from my vantage point, when the trade was happening, I could not process it. I could not believe it. The only thing that made any sense that people were speculating on was that essentially Luka Doncic behind the scenes was holding this franchise at gunpoint and was saying, look, I'm not going to sign an extension. I'm going to move on. I have a small list of places that I'm going to be moving to. So just be prepared. I'm not interested in signing an extension here. If that were the case, which I know Nate Jones, NBA agent, has talked about Nico Harrison glowingly and talked about how this is probably something that they were reading tea leaves. I think you could maybe give the benefit of the doubt there. If that were the case, the idea is that maybe you have to do this quickly and quietly before you lose value. The problem with that is it looks like you already took the package that would have been the result of that,
Mm-hmm.
because this package is just one first and then Anthony Davis. And so then you get into the point of maybe we're just valuing Anthony Davis differently than Nico Harrison. And that appears to be the difference, because Nico Harrison appears to have been targeted and focused on just one player. There was only one player
Mm-hmm.
that could fit what they were looking to get in a Luka Doncic trade. And that one player was Anthony Davis. And so the need to keep this quiet from Nico Harrison's perspective is built around, which he thanked Rob Pelinka in the presser yesterday, which is just weird and shocking.
Mm-hmm.
That was meant because he only had one player in mind. Now, for me, what this rings in my head is arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
Is just I got all these moves correct in the past. You're going to give me credit for getting all those moves correct, and I'm going to show you that I know things so well that this one player, this is the player that I need to go out and get, and it doesn't matter the cost that I get with them. It doesn't matter that I give up Luka Doncic. It doesn't matter that I only get one first-round pick. It doesn't matter that I even give a second-round pick to facilitate the deal. I'm going to get this right player, and I'm so confident because of the moves I've made being correct in the past that this will work out.
Yeah, and I mean, I was going to say that you good.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I don't think you're likely, like anytime arrogance kind of hits in at the end of transactions, usually you get humbled. And so I kind of feel we're at the point now where Nico's about to get humbled on all this. But ultimately they decided that, hey, like, and he said so in the presser, like, we only have 3 or 4 years and then, we'll be forgotten in 10 years. We'll be buried by then. Mm-hmm. They're focused on trying to win now. And you can't have a win now trade while you're trading Luka Doncic. It doesn't even make sense. The whole like thesis of the idea doesn't even make sense. So, they put together a team that is fairly well structured without Luka Doncic for the rest of this season. It's okay. It's probably not championship level. We'll see. Maybe if Kyrie and AD really elevate their games, maybe we will get to that level. But the future, which we were talking about a couple weeks ago on this podcast in terms of assets that they have to improve the team and whatnot, very bare, very thin. And they did not replenish that while giving up Luka Doncic, which is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, to that point, he said yesterday, Rob Pelinka thought he was joking. Like, shouldn't that tell you, like, okay, something's not right here? Like, I'm trading one of the best players in the NBA, top 3, top 4, whatever. Like, I don't think anyone thinks Luka's not top 5. And the other guy thinks you're joking. Like, how? It just makes no sense to me. And it's not it's a great fit. PJ Washington now is like squeezed. He's been awesome. They've already talked about playing Daniel Gafford at the 5. Like, they're going to play PJ at the 3. It seems really weird. So it's not even like a perfect fit to sell that below market there. So, just did you want to talk about the Mavs on ball stuff, or do you want to kind of?
Yeah, we can talk about what the Mavs look like now. But agreed, it's a weird fit. They have now, Gafford, Lively lost for the year, obviously, but in terms of roster build, they have Gafford, Lively, PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, Najee Marshall. These are that's 5 players that are 4s and 5s generally. And then you look at kind of point of attack defense where they've used PJ Washington in the past. We now have PJ Washington as like the lone guy. You got Quentin Grimes and Max Christie to try to help out there. Offensive, the whole offense was built around the idea that Luka Doncic could kind of make everything work. Now you're hoping Kyrie and AD can make everything work from an offensive perspective. AD hasn't led to great offenses by himself wherever he's been. So in the minutes that are staggered away from Kyrie Irving, they're going to try to hold ground essentially. The other thing is the quotes about, us wanting to be a, defensive team, defense wins championships. They were a good defensive team last year. That's how they got to the NBA Finals. I understand that trading Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis should improve you defensively even more, but it's a weird statement when you actually were able to solve the defensive side of the equation. Okay. And now you're trying to add to that while subtracting like the whole offensive foundation that you kind of built around. So I think the thing that is very confusing about all this in the presser, I think we should actually just talk about the presser yesterday, because I think the presser is maybe the most disrespectful presser I've ever seen to the fan base in terms of like reading the room. There was no understanding of reading the room. The presser opens with a joke
Mm-hmm.
about how many people are there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which to me just screams like, hey, you want attention on you, Nico Harrison. Like you're very happy to have all this attention on you.
Mm-hmm.
Then he starts by saying, we understand the gravity of this move. I don't think you do,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a move that we'll talk about all the on court basketball impacts. The off court basketball impacts towards a fan base are
Mm-hmm.
ginormous in this move. You have alienated your fan base in a way that that will reap decades of trouble on your box office tickets unless you win a lot immediately, which I also don't
Mm-hmm.
think they're going to do. But this alienates fans in a way that makes them lose trust in you. And it also is going to make players around the league lose trust in this organization as well. The Dallas Mavericks were once thought of as sort of a potential destination organization, as one that really was kind of ahead of the curve in Mark Cuban's time in terms of taking care of players, player
Mm-hmm.
amenities, and all these different things. Now we've got a situation where one of the top 3 or 4 players in the world is being publicly ridiculed for conditioning over and over and over again, and then explicitly said, like, no, there was no trade request. We just did this on our own. And on top of that, by doing this, they cost Luka tens of millions of dollars because he can't sign
Mm-hmm.
a supermax. So future star players are going to look at this situation and be like, why would I want to go to Dallas if they treated Luka Doncic like this? How are they
Mm-hmm.
going to treat me differently? And so I think the presser was just an absolute disaster. If you were a Mavs fan, you wanted to hear the following. You wanted to hear, from a marketing perspective, you wanted to hear that their hands were tied, that they were forced into this situation, that they did not want to do this situation, but they had to for XY reasons. You wanted to see them paint Luka Doncic as a scapegoat in some regards. The
Mm-hmm.
scapegoat that they tried to paint was like, hey, he's not good at defense and he's
Yep.
out of shape sometimes. That's not an effective message to your
Mm-hmm.
fans who are like, yeah, he's out of shape and he takes us to the finals. And our
Mm-hmm.
defense was pretty good on the way to the finals. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care that he's out of shape. He's incredible. So I think the presser was just an absolute disaster in terms of
Mm-hmm.
marketing this trade. And to me, made me even more confident in the assessment that Nico Harrison is just really, really confident about
Mm-hmm.
his player evaluation here. And he thinks it doesn't matter. He thinks it doesn't matter that he's going to piss off everybody because he's going to be right. And good luck. That's all I have to say on that. Good luck. Because I don't,
Mm-hmm.
you obviously see something differently than the rest of the world sees it. We'll see if you're right. But if you see something differently than the rest of the world sees it, you can still get full value out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do that. So good luck.
Yeah, and then just a couple things too. I mean, obviously, a lot of people posted on Twitter when Luka drinking a beer, but when he
Yeah.
gets to the finals
Yeah.
and then
Michael
pulling it
Finley.
away, like that was he just doesn't like him, right? And
Yeah.
we saw him, got on a plane in LA. He looked to be kind of in shape, and then also, sure, you're trading away Luka, who has injury concerns. Guess who you traded him for?
Yeah.
Literally the guy that is like most known to go into the locker room in the league, right? Like this makes no sense.
Who
And
is also
then
hurt right now.
yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, Dirk Nowitzki kind of posting on Twitter, and then he has my favorite statue in sports, man, the Dirk fadeaway statue.
Yeah.
And then on the statue, it says, "Loyalty never fades away." Like they just did this guy so dirty to me. I believe Luka's quotes, when he said he wanted to be
Yeah.
a Mav for life, all that.
Yeah.
It feels like they just like he didn't want to be in the Luka Doncic business anymore. For being out of shape, being hurt all the time, and just trading for AD. I mean, at that point, just like blow it up then. Like if you don't want to be with Luca, then just get all your picks, tank it up, and then start all the way over. Like this is just such a short. They're like, okay, hey, Clay's getting older. Kyrie's only got maybe 3-4 years left to be in peak Kyrie. AD's they're just like, okay, we got 3 years. They basically like Brooklyn Nets this with like
Yep.
Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce.
Yep.
Like, okay, cool, let's do it for that, and then just give up, not draft picks, but the one of the most marketable, fun players, and just it's insane to just do their fan base so dirty like that.
I think with that in mind, with the fan base fully alienated, it's time to bring on a special guest, a young man who is a very big Dallas Mavericks fan, or maybe I should say was. I'll let John Daigle from Established Run's NFL team. John, are you still a Dallas Mavericks fan? How do you feel 36 hours after Luka Doncic has been traded?
It is funny that I borderline bully our friend Mike Leone about his Buffalo Bills fanhood, but I'm also in the weeds with football, so I am removed from the passion of a team. But for everything else, like basketball, where I'm not in the weeds weekly, I am still a diehard fan. Dirk Nowitzki, my favorite athlete of any sport of all time, have his jersey as well as Tyson Chandler's, have the entire 2011 championship team memorized. I grew up in Dallas, obviously, so very big Mavs fan. And this is still the craziest thing I can recall being awake for, actually. I was awake at 3:30 in the morning, Saturday Central Time. I have no idea why. But then also at the get together I was at, not only stopping down and trying to explain to everyone who had no idea like what Luka Doncic is, like trying to explain a 15-year-old who used to smoke cigarettes and drive a Lambo around Spain, who like was a prodigy a decade ago already. Not only that, but for Dirk Nowitzki, remember, he even said he didn't figure out the conditioning thing coming over from Europe until the tail end of his career, like his early 30s. So again, we have that aspect to wonder about. And then as you said, Dink, the fact that Nico's presser was shockingly out of context. It's the worst Dallas presser since Tony Romo showed up post, I believe it was the Giants Cabo game, whenever they got the first round bye and used that to then go take a trip instead of practicing. And Romo showed up at the presser afterwards and had the famous, if this is the worst thing that happens to me, I've lived a pretty good life quote. It's just, it is such a horrific moment for the organization. That, and at the end of that presser, remember, Nico also used the term that they were approaching a tumultuous offseason. But again, you know who's not having a tumultuous offseason? The Wizards, the Jazz, teams that don't have Luka or the players to get someone of Luka's caliber. So it's wildly inaccurate, everything that happened. To your point also, that is the big deal about this trade too, is that this was the floor package, in my opinion, that they got back in return. Like if all the worst case scenario happens with Luka for the rest of his career while he's under contract with the Mavericks, they can still get this deal done at the tail end of that career point in Dallas. And so it is the kind of deal, in my opinion, where if someone wanted to instead swing their allegiance now, you can. You have my right. You have my willingness to do that because, again, Anthony Davis is not our guy. Like, I don't know why people would want to go to games now. I don't know why people would want to cheer for the Mavericks. I don't care. Like, PJ Washington's a dog, and he was kind of growing into our guy, like an enforcer. But all these players, Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, good players, obviously, but they were sold on the idea that they are the secondary, the ancillary options to someone like Luka, not Anthony Davis. I don't care about Anthony Davis at all. Like, I'm lukewarm on him. If he's good, that's fine. But again, a player like Luka is someone everyone shows up for. You've seen the videos at AAC now, also fans showing up with caskets, like genuinely a memorial yesterday, because that's how it feels. I could go on and on, so I'll give it back to y'all. But this is the most insane thing I have ever experienced in my lifetime in terms of trades.
So you've given your blessing to all other Mavericks fans out here on being able to switch allegiances. Where are you at? Are you still a Mavericks fan in this moment?
It sucks so much because like the Texas Rangers World Series, I was removed from because the old shitty teams, the Josh Hamilton teams that made back-to-back World Series, those are my teams. Once you start, I've lived in Chicago now 5 years. I lived in LA for 5 years. Once you escaped and you can no longer watch those kind of teams because you're at a market and it's harder to find, then you slowly do get removed from them. So I didn't feel like that was my World Series, but the Mavericks still are my team through and through. I believe I'm still a Mavs fan, but I can guarantee you I'm going to watch. This is now the time of the year as well where I watch all your shows and like I jump into spies for DFS and everything. And so I usually at this time of the year find myself watching every Mavs game and a lot more basketball nightly. I can guarantee you this will probably be the fewest Mavs game I watch for the rest of the year because, again, I feel like I have no one to cheer for. I love watching Kyrie play, and even that he feels removed without being the secondary option to Luka.
Do you think they got a chance to make a run though? I mean, Anthony Davis, like you can make a case that Anthony Davis just this year, not taking into the fact of his age context, like Anthony Davis has played just as well as Luka has. He's been awesome. So Do you think do you think they could maybe like make a run here, or do you think this is just too much? Like he can't stay on the court. Kyrie's been injury prone too.
And we've seen this was something Zach Lowe discussed as well, which was the first person I heard give any kind of positive spin towards the deal. Kept reaffirming everyone that the Mavericks are still going to be very good because Anthony Davis, we forget, is a very good player. Oddly, also the kind of player they needed against Boston last year in the finals because they had no interior presence that could help them rebound better against the Celtics. But can they still come out of the West? I don't know. Is this actually give them a player that they can beat Denver and teams of that caliber? Minnesota, who's an improved unit? I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I think they're still in a position. I think for this year only, they are slightly worse from a playoff perspective. I think the value that Luka brings in playoff series over and over again, we have seen this guy close out teams, wear down teams, break down teams. I think one of the very special skill sets of Luka Doncic and of Nikola Jokic is mental processing. In that as these guys get more and more reps against the same team, against the same defensive coverages, they start to figure you out. And later in the series, they put you away. And so I think Luka is still extremely valuable from a playoff perspective. I think Anthony Davis is also extremely valuable for this season. The last 2 seasons, he's been incredible, and he's been very durable the last 2 seasons until dealing with this recent oblique core injury issue that he's dealing with. I think they can still be very, very good. They obviously had a recipe to give Oklahoma City a lot of trouble, but how much of that recipe was simply Luka Doncic being able to dissect and break down a very, very high level defense and get into the open spots from a shooting perspective. They just had a good win over Oklahoma City recently without Luka Doncic. So they've had the ability to do this. Anthony Davis brings them an inside presence that gives them an opportunity to attack Oklahoma City's weakness as well, or what has been a weakness historically. We'll see with Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, who have not played together yet this season, if that remains to be the case. But I think Dallas remains a very, very strong team this year. The challenge is that they pretty much have to capitalize on it this year because lack of ways to improve the team kind of going forward. The West as a whole kind of continuing to get younger and better, looking at what Houston and Memphis are doing. Wemby is coming as well now with De'Aaron Fox. And so the time window for this to go well and to win the fan base back over after this trade is very short, very tight, and they need to. And so I also think that there's going to be a human element, locker room component to this that you talked to in terms of what these players signed up for, that they're getting something different now, and how are the players going to react? And are they going to kind of use this as a catalyst to come together? I don't know. It didn't look that way yesterday. Yesterday, the whole broadcast, when they lose by 60 to the Cavs, is basically a memorial service. The broadcast, the feeling from the players on the floor, everything. So I understand it's fresh. It hits home. They'll have the All-Star break to kind of regroup and get things back together. On paper, I still think they are a dangerous out in the Western Conference. But I think you have to give credit to the fact that Luka Doncic has been an unbelievable postseason player at diagnosing and breaking down top-level defenses that they do not have anymore.
The term win now, but trading away Luka is still so insane for me to even comprehend. And again, for the Mavericks to actually win this trade, what has to happen? Luka has to fade out of the NBA by the time he's 30. It's just such a weird 3-year window of win now with a 31-year-old player who you just exchanged a 25-year-old superstar who, again, is not at his peak. And that's crazy to say because he's already a top 3, top 5 player in the NBA, not at his peak. It's still so wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that draft pick's still not going to be great. Luka's going to be, what, 30 or something when that trade?
That's the other thing. Good. It could have been the 2031 pick. Why is it the 2029 pick? Why is it closer in Luka's window? Like all of these little things, them giving a second round pick to Utah to facilitate this. The reports this morning that they asked for more, and Rob Pelinka held the line of no, you're only getting 1 first-round pick is insanity that Rob Pelinka even had the stones to hold the line, which shout out to Rob because he must have known. And this is another thing. When you give away that leverage of, Rob, we got to keep this quiet. Rob, really, like just you and I. We can't let this get out. Rob's sitting there going, can't let this get out, huh? Okay. Interesting. You also approached us. Interesting. Yeah, you're not going to get everything here. And so just the tactic, the negotiation tactic, they're talking about being concerned about a tumultuous season ahead and what that could potentially lead to. I mean, we would have had to go like Luka turning into Jimmy Butler, I think, for it to equate to what we're dealing, what they ended up getting kind of in the end here, unless they win now. They have to win a title within the next 2 years to kind of justify this trade. Otherwise, it's going to go down as one of the worst trades in the history of sports. I think that's where we're at.
And by the way, that 2029 pick probably doesn't even matter because, again, the Lakers have Luka, and that's going to then depress that 2029 first rounder. Also, the funniest part about this is that the Jazz at some point got a call too. I don't know how they weaseled their way into this. No one will remember they're a part of this trade, but they just decided to slide in and help out a little bit too.
I would love to hear the reporting on that angle, because I honestly think that they couldn't explain to the Jazz what was happening.
No.
Yeah.
Because the Jazz would have been like, here's 8 firsts. Here's Lauri Markkanen. Here's like, we're going to tell the world that, hey, we threw this at you and you said no. Because Danny Ainge loves leaking information about trades that could have happened or that almost misses. So I am very interested to hear, as the reporting unfolds, what the Jazz heard about this, because ultimately, like, the Jazz, they probably called him up and were like, listen, we've got to deal with the Lakers. We need you to facilitate it. We'll throw you a second. You're going to have to take on Jalen Hood-Schifino. And Ainge is probably like, yeah, sure. Like, good. Throw us your seconds. We'll take your seconds. And then I just imagine like them coming across the ticker like, Luka Doncic was in this trade.
What? Yeah.
What?
Did he get hacked? Well, good. Go ahead. No, you good.
I was just going to say, from the fan base standpoint, though, and my last thing, Mike, was that this is, I can only count a handful of times where the moment was so big that even like I was driving and I had to pull over and just start calling people. That was Cliff Lee to those early World Series Rangers teams. That was Roy Williams, the wide receiver, being traded to the Cowboys at the trade deadline as well. And this is something similar to that, where it shocks a whole metropolitan. Like, it shocks an entire city. I'm still taking in every piece of content around the clock. Like, I have just been awake, just listening to all these other voices that typically I wouldn't even care about their opinion. I want everyone's opinion to make sense of this deal. It just befuddles me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, are they kind of undercutting Derek Lively a little bit? Like, you're adding another rim protecting big. They're not a great fit to me for offensive perspective. To like have that hit, I know he's hurt right now, obviously, but like, you're just taking away his ceiling of like Derek Lively really, really growing into a huge impact player by adding Anthony Davis, in my opinion. Do you think that? Do you have any thoughts on just that angle of this?
I think the roster angle of all this is what also made us feel like this. There were 2 components that made us feel like Shams was hacked. Right. Yeah. It's first and foremost, like, Luka Doncic being traded just seems unbelievable. I guess 3 components. Second, the return package, the lack of picks, the lack of pick swaps, all those things like that have become commonplace when NBA stars are traded was not there as well. That made us think like, okay, this can't be real. Then on top of that, it was like the roster fit just doesn't really make a ton of sense from Dallas's perspective to have all these kind of bigs built out. And it certainly puts them in a position. You talk about like they wanted to avoid a tumultuous offseason or different things like that. I think they're going to have that on their hands because they need to rebalance some of this roster, because the roster is now kind of imbalanced towards the bigs, and their best asset, long-term asset, aside from Luka, might have been Derek Lively. And now he's a little bit devalued for sure. Obviously not going to be available this year. It's also going to be interesting to see, we've seen this a lot. Like Chris Paul had this effect. I think Luka Doncic has this effect as well. But bigs who bring verticality really, really benefit from the gravity that Luka Doncic pulls around the floor. So how good is Derek Lively without Luka Doncic? We're going to find that out from an offensive perspective, how much he can continue to grow and develop. And we're going to see, we'll see ultimately if the Lakers end up making a move to solidify that center position more. But we'll see if Jackson Hayes ends up taking a big step forward, getting to play with somebody like Luka Doncic, who brings all that gravity and that ability to throw lobs. But yeah, it's a weird roster that they have on their hands now. I think it's fine for this year, but kind of building out in the future, you look at this team and there is no long-term solution in terms of primary ball handler behind Kyrie. And Kyrie, he's been great this year. He's been durable this year. Those are not the things that we've come to know with Kyrie Irving in terms of durability. So that's a big question mark, is like, how are they going to get a high-end guard kind of in the mix here behind Kyrie Irving. And, they're hoping that all these 3-and-D wing guys that they're, investing in, Quentin Grimes, Max Christie, that builds out a solid foundation on the wing. And I think that's viable. But behind Kyrie, and if Kyrie gets hurt, there's just not a lot. I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie and Jaden Hardy aren't really it. So in a league that has become a little bit more ball dominant, scoring guard dominant, they've got one option for that currently, and it's an option that's in their 30s and hasn't been super durable.
It will also be interesting to see where Kyrie is at mentally the rest of the season, because if the argument could be made that he has matured, and I believe he has within Dallas, it's most likely because he found that friendship with Luka. So where the hell can his head possibly be now? Also for Derek Lively, it's just unfortunate because his trajectory, in my opinion, was the third best player on the Mavericks. He had such a high ceiling to grow into. And yes, because of that pick and roll game now without Luka, I don't know. Still a very good player, but I don't know what he becomes as well, because Anthony Davis probably does take away from Lively, who spent the offseason, as y'all know, shooting threes, like trying to work his way into being a more expansive five for that offense. I just don't know what he is now.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to copy Cleveland, I feel like, but Cleveland has Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. I just think it's going to be a problem. Diego, anything you want to get off your chest before we'll talk Lakers and some other stuff?
I'm going to keep listening to everything, including what y'all are talking about, and what y'all are about to talk about, and segue into as well. To answer your question, Dean or Dink, am I still a Mavs fan? I don't know. Am I maybe a Dirk fan? That could be it now.
Yeah.
But the team I would then leave them for and switch allegiance to would obviously be now my hometown team of the Bulls. And we'll see how that's going as well. So I don't know. It's something I truly have to dig deep in my soul and think about for the next few weeks, because I don't know. I have no idea.
As a person who was a long and now lost Chicago Bulls fan, I don't advise going in that direction. It's a tough decision ahead, John.
It's okay to be a Bears fan, I think, though. I'm not sure. Yeah.
We'll see.
All right, boys. Love you both. Thank you for allowing me to come on and talk about this. I'm going to look forward to listening to the rest of the show.
Thanks, Daigle.
All right, let's talk Lakers stuff real quick. We didn't talk about them at all. Obviously, we love this trade for them. Obviously, they have to trade for another center, I think. But I mean, I don't have much to say. Home run on top of a home run, a home run out of a park that went out of another park. You got Luka Doncic, and you didn't give up that much. So I don't know. I don't really have much to say. Obviously, we could talk about fantasy. Austin Reeves is a huge loser here, and they're not done. They have to add another center here. But anything you just want to add on the Lakers side?
I mean, if you're not a Lakers fan, all of this just feels unfair. Is the first thing that I can say. There's no consequences to their behavior ever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they put around Smush Parker and a bunch of nothings around Kobe Bryant. It doesn't matter. They'll have LeBron James come. It doesn't matter that they're unable to build a full roster around LeBron James and Anthony Davis post bubble season to be able to bring them into championship contention. It doesn't matter. They'll just have Luka Doncic fall into their laps. I mean, you go through the list of players now. You've got Wilt, you've got Kareem, Ryan Russillo and Bill Simmons were doing this. You've got Shaq, you've got Luka, you've got Anthony Davis, you've got it doesn't matter. These are players that they didn't have to draft, that they just acquired, that just fell into their laps. When they do happen to be bad, they happen to win the lotto every few years. If you want to go down the conspiracy theory routes, there's plenty of routes to go there as well. But it just feels unfair if you're a Lakers fan. And so there's a lot of great Lakers content, really informative Lakers content around the internet. But some of it is literally labeled Lakers exceptionalism. And you know what? They're right. The Lakers just get whatever they want, whenever they want it. All these trade ideas that I've seen floated around where it's the Lakers are going to pursue Walker Kessler. And I'm sitting there with what picks? Well, how are they going to get Walker Kessler? And then they get Luka Doncic for with less picks. So I don't know. They can, whatever crazy trades that they want to float around, they can go for it, Lakers fans, because something always falls in your laps that shouldn't fall into your laps. This is outrageous that they get the heir to LeBron James tenure, and it's one of the 2 or 3 best situations you could have potentially landed in the entire league. and they get him in the prime of his career, and they get him where he has to potentially where he now, because of the CBA, will make even less money, and so they get it at a discount as well, and they still have picks to be able to use to round out the team this year. Yeah, it's outrageous. And so, as you know, as a non-Lakers fan, the first thing that hits me is like, this just feels super unfair. I know the league stepped in with the Chris Paul trade many years ago, but it almost feels like, hey, like, league, help us out. Like, how do the Lakers keep kind of landing in this spot? But obviously, you know, people are going to say like fit. That's outrageous. LeBron James and Luka Doncic are going to be able to figure out. Obviously, defensively, there will be challenges in the short term. They traded, you know, one of their best the two of their best defensive players in Anthony Davis and Max Christie. A lineup combinations that are built around Austin Reeves, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic are certainly going to struggle defensively. They'll have to put assets towards trying to rebuild the defensive side of the ball. But offensively, two players of that talent, that caliber, that skill set that can pass the ball, that IQ in terms of dissecting defenses. I think you'll see LeBron playing off ball a little bit more. LeBron maybe used as a cutter a little bit more. Different things like that. They're going to be very, very good offensively, and they're just going to have so much size out there. You know, LeBron has always been positionally big for where he's played. Luka's obviously positionally huge for where he plays. There are going to be challenges defensively for sure in the short term, but I think their ceiling on this team for this year was probably second round exit. And I think they're probably, you know, they probably haven't adjusted their ceiling very much. Their floor is a little bit more unknown this year as they kind of round out the roster. But ultimately, the cupboard is not bare to be able to go and get more help around this team. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of players that are going to want to come to LA to try to, you know, play with Luka Doncic in the premier market in the NBA. So I think if you're looking at this and you're thinking like, oh, you know, the fit is a little bit funky and clunky, we've seen this a number of times. The fit generally doesn't end up mattering. The skill of the basketball players overwhelms the fit. And if you're looking out in the future, you're like, okay, they have their next piece in Luka Doncic, and they have the ability to build because they still have some picks in the cupboard, and we know now that they can kind of turn nothing into something because it keeps happening for the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yep, 100%. And yeah, we'll see. I think they're going to add somebody. We talk about how devalued the center market is. So they have Jackson Hayes, eventually Christian Wood maybe, and Jared Vanderbilt. They'll kind of get by if they do airball. But I think they're going to get somebody here. Certainly Time Lord comes to mind. I think he's right at the top of the list. We heard the comments are looking for an athletic big. Yeah, yep. I mean, Time Lord makes a ton of sense. Obviously, he's got some games played issues, but that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, obviously love this trade. Let's just transition to the other trade that I'm sure everyone, I mean, how did I was writing up matchups and like I didn't take out any rotation pieces from the De'Aaron Fox trade. They kept everyone. Vassell, Castle, sure they gave up some picks. We'll talk about that. But I mean, what a smash to get De'Aaron Fox at that price here. And we'll talk about fit, but I mean, how much of a smash is this?
Yeah, I think the concern for a lot of Sacramento fans and a lot of people around the NBA were the fact that, you know, on this Sacramento trade with De'Aaron Fox kind of signaling where he wanted to go, that you would lose a lot of leverage and you wouldn't be able to kind of recoup full value for De'Aaron Fox. And it certainly feels like that was the case with San Antonio here as the preferred destination. The headline of San Antonio gives up 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and our Sacramento receives, I should say, 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and Zach LaVine. That feels pretty good. But then you kind of dig in on the details. One of those firsts, Charlotte first, is not going to convey this year, and that will turn into 2 seconds. So it's really 2 firsts and 5 seconds and Zach LaVine. And then Zach LaVine, from a financial perspective, is making more money than De'Aaron Fox the next 2 years. So you're still kind of hamstrung a little bit there from a roster build perspective. And then on top of that, you know, the picks that they gave, one of which, you know, San Antonio's is not going to be likely very strong. And then there's the Minnesota 2031 pick. That is a great asset. So I think Sacramento got one great asset. They got a temporary fill in relief for De'Aaron Fox with Zach LaVine, which we'll see if they, you know, the Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan pairing didn't result in a lot of wins in Chicago in the Eastern Conference. We'll see how it results in the Western Conference. But for San Antonio's side, you look at it and they didn't give up any of the Hawks picks, which look like premium picks. that they have kind of at their disposal. They didn't give up Stephen Castle, who looks like a lottery hit for them. They didn't give up Devin Vassell, who looks like a hit for them. They didn't even give up like Keldon Johnson or some of these secondary young bench pieces, Jeremy Sohan, that look like kind of young fits as well. So those are pieces that they could potentially move to find. They now have a combination of picks, young players at their disposal that they can fill in and target kind of exactly what they need around Fox and Wembanyama and Castle kind of going forward. So if they were to figure out that, okay, we need a 3-and-D wing player that is an upgrade over what we currently have on our roster in terms of Harrison Barnes or something like that, they have a bunch of mid-tier contracts, future picks, and young players to go out and facilitate that kind of deal. So they are just positioned incredibly well in this situation. And they're not that far away from getting into the play-in right now. So they can make a push this year for getting into the play-in, have the Hawks pick still at their disposal to get them potentially into the lottery this year. And like it's a very, very smooth transition now. And there's not a player in the world that would be a better fit to pair alongside De'Aaron Fox than Victor Wembanyama, a player that's going to create all sorts of floor space for him, a player that's also going to help from a defensive perspective in terms of the size and protecting the rim kind of behind him, and allow De'Aaron Fox to do what he does best defensively, which is sort of gamble, because he's got very, very quick hands. And that's why, swipe a Fox and his steals production, he can gamble a little bit more when you've got Victor Wembanyama as a rim deterrent kind of behind you. And then De'Aaron Fox's limitations in the past have been more kind of shooting oriented. Well, you have all the floor space in the world from your 5 kind of dragging centers out to get to the rim over and over again and get to the middle of the floor, where De'Aaron Fox is fantastic. Like, that's all there. So it's just a home run trade we talked about a home run trade for the Lakers, is a home run trade for the Spurs as well.
Yeah, and then on top of it, I talked about how they lost rotation players. Yeah, Trey Jones was playing like 13 minutes a game, and they got off Zach Collins' money. Zach Collins has owed $18 million next year. They got off that. They weren't even playing him. So, I mean, just even like all the way down the line, like I think City Sudoku's fun, but like he's not playing anyways. So just to get off Collins on top of giving up what I think is under market, and this goes back to what we talked about so many times, man. Like all these trades and the biggest pieces going like so under what we're used to. You talk about the DeJounte trade, you talk about the Rudy Gobert trade, the Mikal trade. Just every single trade we're talking about, we're like, oh, he went that cheap, huh? So yeah, obviously I love this. And then, like you said, the Kings, I think they did fine. They got some picks back. I mean, Zach LaVine is going to be solid. Certainly the fit's going to be weird. How much on-ball stuff can Malik Monk get? How many triple doubles is Domantas Sabonis going to get now? As they run just so many DHOs as part of their offense. But yeah, I'm okay with Sacramento. I don't have a take, but the Bulls, I mean, they got their first round pick back. They took on Zach Collins' money. Like Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, these guys are barely playing. Like the good news is though they like have a direction now. Which I mean, yeah, I'll hand it to you there with the Bulls takes.
Yeah, I think if you want to be optimistic on the Bulls, I know Winky has been very optimistic on the situation. It's just clean slate. They have a direction picked. They still have more in the cupboard that they could potentially unload with Lonzo Ball, with Nikola Vucevic, with Kobe White, with Ayo Dosunmu, that they could potentially kind of unload and kind of continue to build up the asset cupboard. I think that's the optimistic take, and I think that's a reasonable take to have. My take would be that this is another example of a team that is just unwilling to maximize asset value. They're really a team that, if you look at how they've handled trades in the past, it has not been focused on maximizing asset value. It has been accommodating timelines that work for them. And then, okay, now that the timeline works for us, what can we get now? And you look at like Alex Caruso, they had every opportunity to trade Alex Caruso at the deadline last year, maximize asset value. But they were like, we kind of want to make a run at the play-in, so like we'll just wait till the offseason, and then they take Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso. And Zach LaVine, they had the opportunity to potentially maximize value here, but it's like, we kind of got to get rid of him now because like we got to pick this direction. So yeah, we'll just take the rights to our first back, and we'll take on money because the money doesn't really matter. We're going to pay this guy anyway. So they shed like a year of salary commitments from Zach LaVine to Collins and Huerter, who expire at the end of next season.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it's just like, okay, if we have a front office that is not tenacious about extracting value out of the assets that they have, they're going to have to hit better on player analysis and player acquisition than kind of everybody else around them. And to this point, they haven't shown really the ability to do that either. Dalen Terry as a first round pick didn't really work out. They extend Patrick Williams. Patrick Williams hasn't shown any significant improvements. They also drafted him in the top 10. Matas Pizelis, what we've seen has been intriguing, but it's very early, so it's too early to tell on that front. But they haven't shown the ability to kind of outmaneuver the league from a player analysis perspective. So if you're not going to be tenacious on trying to outmaneuver the league by extracting value on the pieces that you have, then you've got to be better, or you've got to have a market that people want to go to. And Chicago has not been a destination market in free agency for a very, very long time. So ultimately, like I don't see a lot of room for optimism on this front office being the one to ultimately turn this thing around in a way that the Chicago Bulls are serious about competing for championships. They just seem too laissez-faire about extracting value on these situations. We'll see what they are able to do with Vucevic, who they signed to a 2-year extension that put them in this position that they then needed to trade him again. Again, not a great analysis of kind of player value in the market. Now, Vooch has played very, very well this season, but this is the best case scenario you could have gotten from Vooch this season, and let's see what you can get from him from the deadline. Let's see how valuable it was to extend him 2 years in terms of what you can kind of get back. So I'm very skeptical of the Bulls. I think this trade was like underwhelming, but I think that's kind of where all their transactions are. And at some point, you would just like to see them maximize value for a piece that they have. Caruso was the most important one to do so with, and they didn't really do it. So I just don't have a lot of confidence in their ability to try to build this thing from the bottom up.
Yeah, they're so far behind, man. I mean, like obviously the Wizards, like besides the Wizards, is there a worse roster you'd have? I mean, I feel like,
and we're also talking about
counting draft picks and all that stuff too.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, we're also talking about like, yeah, they got control of their pick. Aren't you excited that they have control of their pick? They were 87% plus to have control of the pick for this year. And then next year is top 8 protected. The following year is top 6 protected. Yep. Obviously, you want to be in the top 8 protected next year. But honestly, if you're dealing Levine and Vucevic, how are you not going to be in the top 8 next year anyway? Like, how is this team? This team is not a free agent destination spot. Like Kevin Huerter and Zach Collins aren't going to lead them into the playoffs next year. So like really, and then after that, it would have been top 6. These next 2 draft classes are the ones that people are really enamored with. After that, the top 6 protection, maybe that came into play. And then after that, it would have been a 2nd round pick. So the likelihood of this actually being a 1st round pick that they recouped here is less than 50%. It's more likely that they secured what would have been a 2nd round pick. And so that's where, to me, it's like, and they gave a 2nd round pick. They gave a 2nd round pick in this deal to facilitate to Sacramento. So it's like, ultimately, the Chicago Bulls may have traded a 2nd round pick and Zach LaVine to get a 2nd round pick. That's ultimately what this may have been. And they probably gave up the better pick. The better 2nd round pick between the two. So like, it's just a really, really wild, underwhelming situation that they can paint, as like, we can paint it as we have clarity on moving forward, that they know that they control their pick and different things like that. But honestly, that clarity should have happened long ago. So you're just rewriting mistakes that you made in the past. And it cost 2 years. 2 years of useless, meaningless basketball is what the Chicago Bulls got for their decision-making around DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic.
Yeah, at least maybe they get a 1st round for Vooch, but at this rate, I mean, if you're an opposing front office, and I think this trade's terrible for them. Yeah, like you're lowballing the hell out of him, man. Like they might get like a top 25 protected.
Of course,
it's so bad.
I'd be surprised if they got more than a top. It's certainly lotto protected. Lotto protected first would be the best case scenario, I think, for Vooch at this point in time. And then, maybe Kobe and Ayo, if they wanted to move them, would have more interest. Lonzo Ball can maybe get a couple seconds, something like that. But like ultimately, the cupboard is still pretty bare from an asset management perspective because they keep giving away second round picks. They're like, oh yeah, you can have a second round pick in this deal, no big deal. Yeah. It's just a crazy use of assets that they've had over the last 5 years.
And then, like I said, just tying up the Zach Collins money, tying up the Kevin Huerter money. I mean, that's just cutting off. There's only like so many teams that have extra money to be like kind of a sweetener in a deal. Like Detroit has cap space. You know, they're going to probably be someone making a trade. I hate it. But like we said, at least they have a direction now. That's valuable. All right. Anything else you want to kind of hit here? Went a little longer than we thought. We got a lot to talk about for Monday's big Monday slate today.
Yeah, so this was the emergency podcast for this week. We still will be recording a trade deadline recap podcast talking about all the other trades that happen outside of these two trades. We'll be recording that on Friday morning, early a.m. Eastern time, so we'll get that posted Friday afternoon. We're wanting to do that kind of after the trade deadline has settled. Thursday is kind of a pretty big slate on the whole from an NBA perspective, so we'll be recording that Friday morning. Look for Friday afternoon trade deadline recap kind of in your podcast feed. Otherwise, you know, from a DFS and a props perspective, we continue to be really proud of the work that we're putting out there. EstablishedRun.com/subscribe-NBA for more details on that front. And of course, appreciate you guys listening. If you're listening on your podcast feed, you can also check us out on YouTube, Established Run NBA on YouTube for the video versions of these podcasts. And as always, just really appreciate the support that you guys give by consuming our content and giving us ears to listen to us rant about these different trades and all the ongoings in the NBA.
Yeah, super fun. Prop Streets are out of January. We're off to a good start in February, so we'll keep it rolling there. Appreciate you guys. Catch you next time.